Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm going to tell you about the 16 books I read in May, and I'm going to start off with the book Medea. I rated this one 4.5 stars. I never heard of Medea before I read Circe by Madeline Miller last month, and I saw this book at the library and I'm like, I have to read this book. So I really liked this book. It gave me new appreciation for Medea and her story. I wouldn't read this book again, but I loved reading her story and seeing her perspective on the events history has given her. It was really well written, and I really loved the characters. After that, I read The Mysterious Case of the Alperton Angels. This one I rated 2.5 stars. Book was written through emails, scripts, texts, and transcripts, which is a unique way of writing, and I really liked that. I've read Appeal by this author again, and I rated that one a 3 or 3.5, and I saw this book at the library. I'm like, okay, I'll give this book a try. Nope, I hated this one. I was confused multiple times during this book, and I started to not care after a little bit. A part of me wanted to DNF this book, but I didn't. The ending felt rushed, and I felt like the author had to put a twist in there at the end. I did not like this book, and I feel like it took me forever to finish it because I just didn't care, and I felt like it was dragging on. After that, I read Goodbye Earl, and that one I rated 4.5 stars. Great characters, great story. I had to listen to Goodbye Earl by the Chicks a couple times after I was reading this book because that's what this book is inspired by. Few times it was confusing to keep track of all the characters because there were so many. Also didn't like how the Foxbury drug empire was like randomly put in there at the very end of the book, especially in the last third, and it didn't really resolve into anything. I love the sisterhood between the four leads and how the book ended with all the women in town telling their stories about the Foxbury family. I would read this book again. After that, I read The 12 Days of Murder. I rated this one 4 stars. Fast read, characters were intriguing, and the way the characters were killed was interesting as well. Excuse me. I liked the main character, Charlie, and what she does to figure out what's going on. There were a couple times that Chekhov's gun was mentioned, or had moments like that paid off. I didn't like how there's so many characters and had to keep track of them. That's a big ick of mine, is so many characters, like a lot of characters, and then most of them are just cannon fodder. That's a big ick of mine. There was a twist halfway through that was okay, and the reveal of the killer could have been better, especially with the company reveal. I don't remember much about the company reveal, but I said it could have been better. Interesting idea, but it came too late for me. After that, I read Anyone Who Can Forgive Me Is Dead, and I rated this one 2 stars. Slow read, and more than halfway through I didn't care anymore. People would get introduced with no explanation, and then later we would get backstory or descriptions of who they are, so it was like, okay, who's this person? And then they would never randomly show up, or they would show up later, and then we would get descriptions, and it's like, okay, I don't care about this person. I didn't care about the story that much after a while, and what happens gets revealed in the last 50 pages. Semi-twist at the end, and I was still confused about how certain people died, which wasn't very clear for me. I had to reread portions of this book again because I was just that confused, and it didn't make sense, especially what the characters were doing. After that, I read Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver issue 1. I rated this one 4 stars. Good read, an interesting premise and characters. A little confused about what was going on because I hadn't read some of the issues beforehand. So I was a little confused, but not that much. I would get the second issue of this comic book series. After that, I read Titans United Bloodpact issue 1. I rated this one 5 stars. Interesting story and premise. I would finish the rest of the series. This storyline reminded me of season 4 of Titans, as that season's villains were Brother Blood and Mother Mayhem, and that's who the villains are in this comic book, so it might have been a tie-in. Anyway, I still liked that. Well, I would read the rest of the series. It was like a limited series. I would read the rest of the series because the first issue just drew me in. After that, I read Batman Fortress issue 1. I rated this one 5 stars. Interesting premise, and I didn't need to know or read anything beforehand, which I like, especially since it's the first issue. I would read this comic again, and I would want to read more of the series as well, especially since it's a limited series. After that, I read Dark Crisis, Worlds Without a Justice League, Last Night Standing. I rated this one 3 stars. Confusing at times, and I still have more questions than answers. I don't want to read more of this. I've read the first issue and I'm good. Interesting ideas with Batman and villains, but that was about it. After that, I read Judgment Day, Iron Fist. I rated this one 4 stars. Very fast read, and I liked the characters. A little confused about the storyline and some of the characters. Probably because I hadn't read some of the issues beforehand, so I was a little confused, but other than that, it was okay. But yeah, I was intrigued by the story. I would want to see more of this Loki and this Iron Fist. Great story, and it drew me in. So yeah. After that, these next 3 are 3 comic books that I got during Free Comic Book Day, which was May 4th, so it was Star Wars Day. So these last 3 comics I got during Free Comic Book Day. So the first one I got was Romeo and Juliet, a Kill Shakespeare adventure. I rated this one 3 stars. I liked how Shakespeare's characters from all his plays were all interacting with each other. I really liked that, and I liked how it was all written in Shakespearean as well. But I didn't like how confused it was. Like, it seemed like it was the first issue, but once you read it, you were super confused because just the way it was written. I think maybe there have been issues beforehand, or I hope this wasn't how this series starts, because it's not a good way to get your audience involved, because I was super confused. Because I thought, oh, this is the first issue, I'll be good. Nope, I don't think it was the first issue, because I was super confused about what the heck was going on. So that's why I rated it 3 stars. It was interesting characters and storyline, but I was so confused with what was going on in the storyline that it did not make for enjoyable reading. After that, I got Bloodhunt issue 1. I rated this one 5 stars. Both storylines in the comic gave me promise. It makes me want to read more. I liked learning more about Jubilee and learning more about her. Wanting to learn more about Jubilee and her story in this comic book line, and it makes me want to read more about the Bloodhunt storyline as well. After that, I read Star Wars issue 1. I rated this one 4 stars. Good characters and where they're going. I was confused about where the timeline was for this. I was confused about where both stories took place chronologically. I haven't read any of the other comics beforehand, so I didn't know who some of the characters were or what was happening. It was a fast read, but during it I was really confused where this was taking place in the Star Wars timeline, because it seemed to take place between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, but I couldn't tell you for sure. After that, after reading all those comics, I read It's a Date Again. I rated this one 4.5 stars. Really great story and characters. The premise drew me in, and I'm not a rom-com person, but I've been reading a lot of rom-coms or romantic books lately. It's really weird. I knew who the main character was going to end up with pretty early on, but I still enjoyed reading the book. Everything got resolved in the last 20 pages with some twists. Wish we got more of one of the boyfriends in the book, because he only gets mentioned for a little bit and then he's disqualified. And I'm like, I wish we got to learn more about you in the book. Other than that, it was a really short read and I really enjoyed it. After that, I read The Quiet Tenant. I rated this one 4 stars. This book has been on my TBR for a while, and it was a pretty good book. Good story, good premise, short chapters, which I like, and I liked getting perspectives from all 3 of our female protagonists. I like the similarities and differences between Emily and Rachel's experience with Aiden, because you can tell how he treats you can tell the difference between how he treats each woman. Wish the book didn't end as abruptly as it did, because it ends really abruptly, and you're like, oh, okay. But overall, it was a really good book overall. And then the last book I read in May was The Dead Girl in 2A. I rated this one 3 stars. Good idea for a premise, and the first half of the book was really good, but I started to zone out in the second half. I felt like there was a lot of stuff going on, and I didn't care half the time. It was a bunch of like mumbo jumbo, and I'm like, I don't care. So I was kind of like zone out during that. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on with the reveals in the last half, and I just didn't care after a while. A few lines of dialogue in the book did make me laugh, though. And I'm like, oh, this was a couple of times while I was reading this, I'm like, if this was my copy of my books I got off from the library, I'm like, I would have like circled, I would have highlighted stuff, but it's from the library, so I'm like, I can't do that. But there were a couple of times I wanted to. I didn't like the prologue. Not the prologue. I didn't like the epilogue of this book. It just felt kind of not redundant, but kind of pretentious, and I didn't like it. And I didn't like how it was written, because it makes sense in the story why it was written that way, but I just didn't like it. So those were all the books I read in May. There were 16 of them. If you have any recommendations for books that you want me to read for June, let me know down below. If not, I will see you guys next month. Bye!